Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Rowe.
And I'm Nique yours.
And welcome to The Invisible Men, where we make the achievements of incredible men invisible no more. Good afternoon, and welcome to the latest episode of The Invisible Men. My name is Ian Rowe, from a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute.
I'm Nique yours, a member of the Leadership Network at AEI.
And we're very excited. In The Invisible Men is all about making men that you may not know, invisible no more, because they have done amazing things. And in our society today, we want to uplift Black excellence, examples of people who are adopting the principles of free enterprise, family, hard work, to do amazing things. And we are very excited today to have as our guest Ralph Clark, who Nique and I have known for we won't say
how long, right? A
minute. But to suffice it to say that Ralph is an extraordinary individual, and we wanted an opportunity for Ralph, for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and the organization that you have shaped over the last years. It's having a huge impact in our society today.
Well, thank you for that, Ian. I've been looking forward to seeing you guys. It's like we said, it's been more than a minute, I guess, since we connected. And thank you very much for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it. So I'll keep I hate talking about myself, but so I'll keep it relatively brief. Born and raised in Oakland, California. Went to University of the Pacific, got a degree in economics, and then went on to work at IBM in the early 80s, which was a really interesting time to work at IBM. I was a sales representative for what was then called the data processing division, which we sold the large mainframes that were in these things called data centers, which no one knows what they are these days. And then got lucky enough to be accepted to and attend Harvard Business School, which is where the three of us met. And then right out of business school, went to work on Wall Street with Goldman Sachs and then Merrill Lynch. And the idea for me was always to kind of get back to the West Coast, where I was born and raised, and become a serial entrepreneur. And so I've been doing that now since the kind of late 90s. And currently, I'm the president and CEO of a company called ShotSpotter, which provides an acoustic gunshot detection service that police departments use to be more responsive to incidents of ongoing gunfire, particularly in those communities where gunfire is somewhat persistent and unfortunately has become normalized and oftentimes doesn't get the appropriate response from law enforcement. Police departments tend to like to respond to homicides, I would say, or investigate homicides. And our firm belief is that just understanding that the vast majority of gun violence goes unreported and therefore doesn't elicit response, that there's a lot of power in responding to these incidents that kind of create a bit of a preventive or deterrent model. And our saying is that, if you want to prevent next week's homicide, investigate today's shooting. Because the other thing is that we've learned over the years with our work is the vast majority of gun violence that's perpetrated in these communities is actually perpetrated by very, very few individuals. This is not an issue of kind of wholesale communities engaged in violent behavior. This is literally just a few handful of individuals that kind of create this problem in our most at-risk, underserved communities. And that's the thing that we're trying to help address with our work and our technology.
Wow. How did you come up with this idea?
So I didn't come up with the idea. The idea was developed by our original founder 20 years ago. His name is Dr. Bob Schoen. He's a brilliant mathematician and engineer, and he had been doing some work at Stanford Research Institute. He's known as the father of epicenter of things. So using very sophisticated math processes to determine the epicenters of earthquakes, Soviet Union missile testing and the like. In addition to being quite a brilliant engineer and mathematician, he's also an incredibly beautiful human being that became aware of a local gun violence issue in a neighboring community in Silicon Valley and thought that he could apply these same kind of math principles to be able to detect, locate, and alert on incidents of outdoor gunfire. So the way our system works, just to describe it briefly for your viewers, is we'll deploy sensors across a coverage area, and these sensors are spread out from one another, and they're designed to basically ignore ambient noise. But when they detect or sense a pop, boom, or bang, they'll timestamp that pop, boom, or bang. And because of the relative locations of each of these sensors, they'll have different timestamps. And it's those timestamps, those differentiated timestamps, allow us to do this time of arrival analysis and using math like intersecting hyperboli and the like to basically pinpoint that exact location of that pop, boom, or bang. We then go through a couple classification steps to ensure that the things that we alert on are in fact gunfire versus other pops, booms, and bangs. And the whole process takes place within 30 to 45 seconds of the trigger pull. From trigger pull basically to the alert showing up in a patrol officer's car on their handheld device and the like. And again, what makes it such a game changer is, again, 80 to 90% of gun violence goes unreported. It's become so normalized, sadly, in some of these communities. People don't call for a lot of legitimate reasons. I mean, one is like recognition. I'm not sure exactly it's a gunshot. Another one, R, is retribution. There's concern that, hey, I don't want to be a snitch. If I call, someone might try to harm me in a way. That's a very real situation. The other one is, hey, someone else will call, right? It's someone else will call. I'm not sure. And so all those things kind of together allow it to become normalized to the point where no one calls. Or again, less than 20% of the time, less than 10% of the time, people call, which means there's no response. And I think criminals know this, violent criminals know this, of course, so there's not much of a deterrent for them to stop that activity. And it's really frustrating because, again, it's very few individuals that are holding whole communities basically hostage. And that's the thing that we want to break. And when we can break that, a lot of it has to do with, I think, how community perceives police. And when they don't see the police response to incidents of gunfire, but they do see police response for all manner of, I call them nonsensical things, giving people tickets for, busted, tail lights or, unregistered cars or the like, or, actually arresting kids that are smoking marijuana, but in the same thing, 3 miles away in the more affluent suburbs or communities, right. Kids are giving full on beer bashes or whatever. Those kids aren't getting arrested. They're getting celebrated in film. I think a risky business. I mean, the dichotomy is just, it's not lost to these individuals that grew up where I grew up in East Oakland to kind of know that it creates a very cynical environment. And when you have a community that is feeling cynical about police, you can't have public safety outcomes. Police can't be effective in doing what they should be doing, which is serving and protecting. We're very much into the guardian model of policing or law enforcement as opposed to the enforcer model. That's the thing we're trying to reverse.
I'll tell you what, you've delivered, I think I counted 6 best practices in about 60 seconds, which hopefully our audience appreciates. One comment you made really resonated in the fact that it's very few people committing these very violent acts. And I've often said to my son, listen, it's a handful of folks living in their mother's basement, not working, mama's not watching them. And these are the folks that are terrorizing a community. It's of course, mine's anecdotal and sloppy, but your analysis and your insight to that point is really very powerful. And that guardianship model. So there's a lot of talk nowadays about what training police officers need to be more effective. And you reference this guardianship model or guardian model. Tell us more about that. And is there an extension of your work that leads to training or retraining of officers?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because as keen as we are being a technology company kind of based in Silicon Valley, we're super proud of the technology. It's very sophisticated. It has 34 plus patents associated with it. A lot of our work really has to do around after we apply the technology, really leaning in with our agency partners around implementing best practices. So we have a full-on customer success organization, and our view is that if the technology is not being used the appropriate way, it produces little value. You have a very interesting, sophisticated system that's telling you about gunfire. But if you're not really repivoting yourself, re-engineering yourself from a process point of view, in responding to and investigating these incidents and really kind of showing up. One of the best practices, for example, we highly recommend is, after officers get on scene, we're asking officers to get out of their cars, which doesn't happen today with incidents of gunfire, because typically on a 911 call, the very few times they do receive it, the modus operandi appropriately is to drive around because you don't have an exact location to go to. Because of our technology, we're very precision oriented. So we like the notion of getting cops to dots. We're typically within 10 to 15 feet of where the gunfire happened. So we're asking officers to get there quickly, get out of their cars, get to the dot. If they're not encountering a perpetrator or aiding a victim, which happens sometimes, looking for physical forensic evidence, being able to interview witnesses that are on scene if you're getting there within, say 2 to 3 minutes versus never, because you never get the call, you can kind of engage the community that way. And then after things settle down, we ask people to go knock on some doors and say something to the effect of, hey, my name is Officer Clark, and I'm here because I got a ShotSpotter activation. I just wanted to check in to see if you're okay. Because that's exactly the way police would respond if a gunshot was fired in an affluent neighborhood. They're going to, hey, are you okay? We're concerned for you. We're okay. And I think what we find is that, maybe the first 30 or 60 days that takes place, people are really skeptical. It's like, why are you asking me if I'm okay? I'm not used to seeing police being concerned about my welfare. But like when you start really kind of taking that approach, the community sees it, and they're your most effective resource to prevent and reduce violent crime and other crime as well. I think police can only be effective if they have the will and trust of the people. And if they don't have the goodwill, and the trust of the people, their occupations are super expensive. They're not particularly safe for the people engaged in the occupation, and they're not very effective. And that's the thing that we're trying to change. And that's why, and you haven't asked the question, so maybe I'll ask the question myself because I want to give the answer about the whole defund the police issue. And I think I've been on a couple panels and people ask me about defund the police. And I think they expect me to say that I really have a negative reaction to that. And, honestly, I have a really positive reaction to that, because despite the very aggressive tone of quote unquote defund the police, which scares people, is bringing a lot of energy to this discussion. And the benefit of having that energy brought to the discussion is they're basically kicking down the door and getting in the room where it happens, because of this energy of defund the police. And mostly what happens is when people get in the room, they're not literally calling for defund the police or abolish policing. They're calling for reimagining, re-engineering policing, reprioritizing what they are doing when they're doing it in their communities. They want to have a voice and say in how policing gets done. This is incredibly important, incredibly powerful. And yes, it kind of makes few people a little bit uneasy. A lot of my clients, in fact, I don't know that most chiefs of police really like the term or movement, defund the police, but I think it's going to make them better. It's going to make them safer. It's going to make them more effective. It's going to make communities more effective. And there just has to be this recognition that certain amount of power is going to have to be ceded to community, because communities help co-produce public safety outcomes. Public safety outcomes are not the 100% purview of a police department. They can't be held accountable 100% for public safety outcomes. It has to be that those public safety outcomes are co-produced with the cooperation and trust of the people to help them do their jobs.
Yeah, Ralph, this is fascinating. One thing I find very interesting about what you're doing, it's a predictive system in some ways. A few years ago, I think in Chicago, the police adopted a system where they tracked individuals based on their engagement in violent behavior. And so you develop these profiles based on individuals to predict potential negative behavior. But what you're doing is actually you're basing everything on the actual event, which is a much more powerful, not dehumanizing technology and applications. That's very fascinating.
Yeah, and I think we do have a technology that is, it would used to be described as predictive policing. We don't like that term. We like the term more around precision policing and really abstracting out personal identification things, because that cuts against the grain, I think, of developing community trust and like profiling and stuff. We're not interested in that. You have like these feedback loops and the like that can, really create, I think, I have this term that I call kind of over policing and underserving, right? And that's the thing that we have to change, where communities are saying, hey, look, the pushback around defund the police is really like, I don't want to be over policed and underserved at the same time. I want to be served first, right? And I even push back on the notion of the terminology community policing. I don't care for it personally, because I only hear community policing applied to at-risk, underserved communities. I never hear about them talking about community policing of affluent neighborhoods. And at the end of the day, communities do not need to be policed. Criminals need to be policed. Communities need to be served. Communities need to be protected. So let's stop talking about community policing, because I think it's doing what they're trying to do a disservice. It's got the wrong words matter, I think. And I think it just sends the wrong signal when you say, oh, I've got community policing, like that's supposed to be a good thing. In my view, again, where I grew up, East Oakland, community policing is not a good thing. It's like, well, why do you feel like you have to police me? You're my servant, you're my protector, you're my guardian, you're not my policeman. I don't need you to police me. And it just kind of harkens back to I think some of the original stains of police, and I think we're all familiar with, is around slave catching patrols and the like. It's kind of doubling down on that notion, from my humble opinion. But I want to have to acknowledge, I'm very much in the minority on that. So full stop.
I think our viewers and listeners would benefit mightily also to learn about young Ralph growing up in East Oakland, and who were the people and what were the values that you embraced that brought you to this place today?
So I was raised in a single female head of household, along with my sister, for a number of years before my mother met and married my stepfather. I think I was about 10, 11 years old by the time that had happened. And so my mother's been obviously a very important factor in my development, but almost equal to that, I would say. And I don't know if it's by design or by accident. Maybe she was super concerned about me or whatever. But one of the things that she did smartly as a very young mother of a young African-American male was she made sure I got to a great school. And for us in East Oakland and a lot of other communities, that school in the would have been, I'm going to date myself now, but in the 60s, a lot of those schools were Catholic schools. They just had a really interesting model where they could provide quality education, just not book education, but I think moral education as well, at very low cost. And maybe it's because they had subsidized teachers in the form of priests and nuns and the like, so they didn't have to pay them union wages and the like. But I remember just going to my school was St. Cyril's, and there's one, I've been involved with the Oakland Boys and Girls Club for a number of years, and they have this notion that when a person outside of your family takes an interest in your development, that's a very powerful influence. I mean, you're obviously going to have family members that are interested in your well-being, but when someone outside of your family takes a genuine and sincere interest in your development, it could be an extremely powerful motivator. And for me, that individual was Sister Marcella. And I mean, I've known her. I mean, I've stayed in touch with her over the years, even when we were back at HBS. And post HBS, I'd go visit her, take my family to go visit her when she was a retired nun. I mean, just this powerful force of a person that was probably about 5'1", but just had such moral authority. Even as an adult, when I think about her as an adult now, I mean, she was just an amazing, amazing person. I would say the thing about Sister Marcella was that she really believed in me. I mean, I'd say, and there was a group of friends I went to school with, we all thought we were Sister Marcella's favorite. Although I truly was the favorite of Sister Marcella. But, this was a person that in her eyes, I could do no wrong, and that my life represented just an amazing set of possibilities. And I can't think of any other person, again, outside of my family, probably even more so than my family, who just a person that believed in me. And you could just see it the way she would look at me is just like, she could look at me and just say, I think you are going to go off and do super amazing things. And none of us knew what that would be or clue, but we just knew that we were loved and supported, and people thought the best or saw the best in us, I guess I would say. And I think I got a decent, education as well, because, you're studying theologians and the like. And I think that set me up pretty well for college, because I, kind of been exposed to, the great, Catholic thinkers. And this too, for many of your viewers probably wouldn't be relevant, but this was an amazing time when I was going to school where the whole Vatican II thing was going on, where the whole kind of Catholic faith was undergoing almost the same type of civil rights revolution, but from a church point of view, where they were kind of, we're going to kind of get away from the superstructured top-down thing to more of a kind of a liberated theology, and, kind of moving away from, Latin mass to why would we have mass in a dead language that nobody can understand? Do we kind of think it's a good idea to have mass in English? But anyway, so all those things were just kind of really going on. And I just remember, reading a lot. I was playing a lot of chess too, because this was an amazing time too, when Bobby Fischer was kind of taking the world on in chess. And so that was a game that was, didn't cost a lot, easy to play. And I remember a few summers when I was in elementary school, literally playing chess like 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Because I couldn't go very far, because I had to babysit my younger sister at the time. And so my mom was okay with my across the street neighbor, Joe Vieira, coming across the street. He couldn't come in the house, but we could literally be out on the front porch and play chess. And we would play chess from literally sun up, to sundown. And then on the weekends, we go to the library and we try to up each other's game, because we'd be trying to secretly check out books on chess to develop kind of new strategy. This is before the internet. There's this thing called the library you have to physically go to and check books out. But so that was all very powerful and interesting. And then I would say, when just as I was graduating high school, another interesting person accidentally came in to my life. Actually, HBS and Harvard Law School graduate, Barry Lawson Williams, which is someone you guys should definitely. Do you know Barry?
I do.
Okay,
sounds like we have another guest for the Invisible.
Yeah, you should definitely get Barry. And Barry wasn't as directly involved as Sister Marcella, but he took enough interest in me, and he wouldn't remember this, although I try to remind him of this all the time. He's maybe getting up in age, he forgets easily or doesn't like to be embarrassed. But for whatever reason, one day he invited me. I was in still high school at the time. And he invited me to go have lunch with him. And at the time, he was a VP at Bechtel. And I'm from Oakland. And for people that don't know the Bay Area, people say Oakland, San Francisco. In the 70s, let me tell you something. Yeah. Oakland is San Francisco's on the other side of the world. It's just you go there every now and then. For us, it's like, what business would my family have in San Francisco? Not much, because we were pretty poor, actually. So, but anyway, for whatever reason, Barry invited me over to San Francisco, and I think Bart had just gotten going or wherever. Somehow, between Bart and the bus, I ended up getting over there. And I will never forget this. I just remember checking in at the lobby and going up this elevator up this huge Bechtel building. And the thing that struck me was when I get off on his floor and he's at the elevator to meet me. And as we're walking from kind of the lobby area back to his office, and his office had this amazing view of the bay and everything. I've never seen so many white people be deferential to a black man. It's just, you never saw anything like this. And of course he was suited and booted in the whole 9 yards. Yeah. And he's like, oh, yes. Oh, Mr. Williams. Yes. Can Mr. Williams, it had to be, it was almost like he staged it. It's like a movie. It wasn't. That's just the way it was. But to me, I just never seen it. I'd never seen anything like that. I was like, I don't know what you do. I have no idea what you do, but I think I want to do something like that. I don't know what it is that you do, but I like you were working in San Francisco, and I like the view that you have, and I like people calling you Mr. Williams.
You are demystifying success. This is the exact reason we are running this podcast.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah, because he suddenly like, wow, he became very visible to you.
One time, and it took that one time. It's like, oh, okay, this is the art of the possible. This can happen. Maybe it won't happen, but I can see it. It can happen. It did happen for him. Maybe it can happen for me. So
just spend a minute on that, because you started the call saying that you love this idea, even though you work for big companies. This idea of becoming a serial entrepreneur was very attractive to you. So given all the stories about lack of access to capital, particularly for Black entrepreneurs, what led you down that path, and how did you go about raising capital for ShotSpotter?
Yeah, so I think that, I guess, brings me back to applying to Harvard Business School. So I'd worked at IBM, very successful. I would never, ever thought about leaving IBM. And then Boeing was my client when I worked at IBM. And then I got the notion, working at IBM, we had this thing called the President's Class, where they fly high potential candidates back to Boston. And there was this 2-week class taught by Harvard Business School professors, including, in my case, at this particular time, it was Sam Hayes, who was one of the professors. And I remember, and I was actually in that class with Donna Stoddard, who you may or may not remember.
I had her.
Okay, yeah. So Donna and I both worked at IBM. We were both in the President's Class.
Right.
And at the time, we both said, hey, we're going to go apply to Harvard Business School. She ended up doing it, and I ended up not doing it right away, but a few years later. But it just made a big impression on me. But anyway, I did apply, and was fortunate enough to be admitted. But part of the admissions process was to be interviewed by a Harvard alum in Seattle at the time. And his name was Artie Burke, class of 63, the famous class of 63. And I remember talking to him because I never considered myself to be a serial entrepreneur. But in talking to him in the whole interview process, that was his whole life, was just being an entrepreneur. And I mean, almost like the Barry Williams in a different way, is like, there's a life of like not having to be a part of a big blue blanket with security. At the time, IBM was very secure. It's very different now. But at the time, it was like, lifetime employment practices and policies and the like. And the notion of like getting out on my own and being an entrepreneur was very strange. So Artie kind of exposed me that a little bit. And then getting to Harvard Business School and meeting brothers like yourself, it became very clear that, if you have a reputation and a credible reputation and, producing high quality work combined with a Harvard Business School degree, there's not a lot of risk to be an entrepreneur. I mean, if you fail, I mean, it's not really failing. In my mind, it's like it's a growth path. I mean, you're learning something from it. You're growing, you're learning, and there's no such thing as failure. So that began to kind of open up the aperture, I would say, in that regard. So I felt I still needed to get a little bit more kind of post Harvard Business School. I wasn't completely confident that just the IBM experience and the HBS degree was enough. So then I felt like, okay, I need to get kind of one more thing.
Yep.
And that thing for me was kind of going deeper in finance and just seeing more companies and, the raising capital and, going public and, doing M&A advisory work. So, but I knew I wasn't going to be there for like very long. I mean, I was just like, I think I can get what I need to get out of here in 2 to 3 years. And it just worked perfectly according to plan. So I said, okay, like with that, IBM, Harvard Business School, Goldman Sachs, I mean, I'm going to be employable, hopefully. And even if I run into an entrepreneurial situation where it doesn't completely work out, I'll just go do the next thing, which then kind of leads me to ShotSpotter. When I was again, the company was founded already by Dr. Bob Schoen. And I'd gotten the call. I'd been around for about 10 or so years. And I'd gotten the call because I'd been the CEO of a company called Guardian Edge, which was acquired by Symantec in a fairly high profile acquisition. So my name kind of popped up on a radar screen for headhunters. And one headhunter was doing a headhunter search for ShotSpotter. And living in Oakland, I was vaguely familiar with the technology. Some of my friends worked on Oakland PD. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. I think Guardian Edge worked out extremely well for me, along with some other things that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, where I wasn't even sure exactly if I was going to go back to work or just do something more philanthropically or whatever. But I was curious enough, just being curious. I said, let me go check this out, because I hear a little bit about this in Oakland. And I'll never forget, I went down to the company and met Dr. Bob and the team, and they're doing just their passion around, policing or whatever, but it was a broken company. And I was like, yeah, this is really interesting. You guys are trying to do something powerful. I'm not sure you're going about it the right way, but I want to help you if I can. So what? But I don't want to join, because I wasn't looking for a job. And so for about 3 months, I was kind of going down and spending time. It kind of started kind of 1 day a week. Then 1 day a week became 2 days a week.
Right.
And like 3, I said, man, you guys are going to have to pay me now. It's like, I'm doing work here. And I got sufficiently excited about the work. And I think the thing that really did it for me was going to a NOBLE conference, which is National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and really kind of talking with a number of folks in the organization around their challenges of dealing with urban gun violence. And I said, this is something I have to do. And I by then I developed a business model pivot that I thought could help the company be successful, which is kind of converting from a premise-based CapEx, high-priced perpetual software license model, heavy lift, which is where the company had been for the past 10 years, to some success, basically selling to early adopter agencies. But I could see a window of selling to more of the unwashed masses of police departments that maybe didn't have the budgets that a Boston or San Francisco had, if the board and investors would be willing to support a business model to a managed services subscription-based business model, and being long-term greedy as opposed to short-term greedy. And by long-term greedy, I mean, we're just going to charge an annual subscription fee, super reduced price, get people in. We were pretty confident, or I was pretty confident at the time, that if we got people in, they start using the technology, seeing the results, there's no way they can go back. They can't, once you go to see, you can't go unsee. And so the board investors backed that vision, and I joined the company. By then, it was when we first started talking, it was May 2010. I think I formally joined like in September or something like that. And then we've been off to the races ever since. We're about 25 or so customers or cities, police departments when I joined. We're over 100 today. Wow. Large cities, medium-sized cities, small cities. We took the company public in 2017, which is SSTI, and I'm not promoting stock or anything like that, because I don't want to get in trouble with the SEC. But we are, to my knowledge, I think we are one of the few African-American-led CEO public companies where the CEO actually took the company public, as opposed to joining the company as a CEO that was already public. So we're really, really proud of that. And we've built an amazing team. I think we're doing really important work. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, but it's been quite a journey.
Incredible.
Ralph, it's amazing. So maybe our last question then. As you know, the originating idea behind the Invisible Men 30 years ago is when Nique and I and other fellow Harvard Graduate School men created a film all about this imaginary 16-year-old kid, Darryl, Black kid growing up in forgotten USA, this imaginary urban city. And we were providing advice to Darryl about how to navigate the world and where he could lead his life on his own terms. So given all the craziness in the world right now, any words that you would share with our Darryl and the Darryls like him across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, Darryl, I mean, we believe in you. We believe in you. And we know that you can do amazing things. Make good choices, defer gratification as much as you can, be long-term greedy as much as you can. Continue to be curious about the world, but most importantly, we believe in you, and just kind of keep at it and keep positive. Don't ever give up. Be persistent.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ralph. That was powerful and amazing, and congratulations, man.
Yeah, my brother, I just want to say I am so proud of you and your journey. We didn't even get to talk about you as a father, but I know you're doing remarkable things there as well. And so you've inspired me today as well. I got a little more work. You know, the one thing I remember about you is the second year, I think you graduated with honors from Harvard Business School. I never forgot that because I didn't. But there's always room for improvement. But I'm just super proud of you and thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Good seeing you both. And shout out to both of you as well. I know you're doing some amazing things with your family. We've got 4 ourselves. So let's bring up this next generation, not only of our own kids, but other kids as well. I hope there's some young people who'll get an opportunity to encounter you guys and the work that you do. I think it's really important. So thank you so much again for having me. Really appreciate it. And let's stay in touch.
Yes,
for sure. 100%.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching another episode of The Invisible Men. You can find other episodes at the AEI podcast channel on YouTube or the website invisible.men or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.